Hello, my lovelies. I'm Jenny O, the author with no last name, and today I want to talk about reading series as an author. And this has actually been something on my list since at least the end of November, and here we are. It's February or even March, and we're finally getting around to it. So this might be my last kind of author tube video for a while, so we're going to hopefully get back to talking about game brands and doing Let's Plays and stuff like that. But yes, I have been wanting to talk about this for a while, and there's like three different things I want to talk about. I, as an author, write series. Both the all my published books are part of a series. We've got my Tales of the Heaven Heathen series, and these two are the first two books of a trilogy in the Thwarting Expectations series. So when I first started wanting to write a series of books, I was like, oh my god, I know I like writing long things, but writing a series is just like this huge kind of expectations of what's going to happen and what do I have to do and all that. And it does help that I am a planner when it comes to this type of thing, and I do have things like timelines, and I have plot synopsises and ideas of when things are going to happen in my books. But it was like, oh my god, I have no idea what I'm really getting into in doing this. I need some help. So I went down and I went to Amazon, or I went to the bookstore, and I found this book called Writing the Fiction Series, and it's by Karen Weisner, Karen S. Weisner, Wiesner. And I read it through, and it uses Harry Potter as an example in the back, and I was like, oh, this is the worst example ever. but I see what you're trying to do. But I was reading it through, and she was talking about, if you're writing a series, you need to figure out what type of series it is, and, this is, here's some different stuff to work out your series. Here's some worksheets and stuff like that. It was really, really helpful for me when I was first contemplating writing The Lone Prospect and the sequels to it, and because I was like, oh, I've read so many series as a reader. How do I tackle this as an author? And after I was reading this and I started getting more analytical about the series I was reading, I started to kind of pick out what writing styles different authors I was reading had. So, the reason why I say writing the fiction series, the idea of when you're going through and planning your series, that Harry Potter is an awful example of plotting your series out, is because I know pretty much for a fact, because Rowling has even said it herself, she did not have a plot outline for Harry Potter. She had a beginning, and she had Voldemort, basically. She had Tom Riddle, and she has the obstacle conflict, and then she had her epilogue. Like, she wrote, I don't know, she maybe wrote the first couple chapters, and then she wrote the epilogue. And so she did not have any sort of set plan other than, I'm going to do a year. It's March now. Things have to start happening at Hogwarts per book. And so by the time you hit book 7, it really starts to tell, especially given how long it is, that she didn't have a real outlined plan of how this was going to go, because she kind of pulls almost out of her left field wand lore and the Deathly Hallows and even the vanishing cabinet was kind of one of those things she pulled out of left field as she was writing the books. You know, we have two or three different, at least two different lores about the werewolves in these books, and you know, she had to go back and write a whole video game featuring Bill Weasley to kind of justify the ones that she brought up in in the second book. When then she had Prisoner of Azkaban, and a whole nother thing with different thing with werewolves in there, and so it starts. It did not feel like. Then we read the epilogue, and it just did not feel like an organic thing of what happened from the previous, you know, from the previous 7 books. It just didn't feel organic enough. You know, was the Harry Ginny romance really that obvious? Was the Ron Hermione romance really that great? No. And it just, the things that were brought up in the epilogue were not really supported in the previous 7 books. And you can disagree with me on this. That's fine. It just, and I could just feel like she didn't have a plan, just because how all over the place it started to be, especially in book 7 when they're spending so much of their time in the forest and we're not seeing the real effects of the war. And another one I can tell is a pantser who doesn't have plans when they're writing their books, just from the way they talk about it. And I have read an entire series by her, was Kim Harrison in the Hollow series. So she had these characters and this idea, and I mean, she had a great world, but the epilogue, again, and the romance, and these were adult books, so the romance could have been a lot more obvious and built up. The romance that she wanted, that the two characters she wanted to get together, it just, the way she went about it, and didn't feel like the ending was earned, I guess. Like, she had this epilogue of the happy ever after she wanted, but it just didn't, by the time you got to the end of it, it didn't, the epilogue she had planned didn't feel earned versus, you know, what the book she had written. So then on the other hand, I can read books that I can tell that the author has a distinct plan on where they're going. And that is specifically Jim Butcher. And he's all the way over there, so you can't see him. I can tell that Jim Butcher plots his books. And it's more than that. He says that he has a plot for, you know, I believe there's 25 files he wants to do, and then he has this, I don't know, it's upwards of around 30 books that he's trying to get to, this apocalyptic trilogy that he's got going. So you can feel that each of these books has a set goal to where he's going and what he wants to set up to get to his end of days type of thing in his world. So you can tell that the building blocks are there in place of what he's doing. And then you have people like George R. Martin. He's up here. You can't see him, but where he talks about how he plants the character seeds, and he has a general idea of where he's going, and then he wants the characters to grow and evolve and change as he's writing. And it's very interesting to him how the characters change, and if he knows where it's going, he kind of loses his motivation to write. So you can kind of see that in his books, where he might, you know, bring in a character that you have no idea what does this guy have to do with the plot? You know, why are we suddenly with this person? But, you know, he's just, you know, well, I just find him interesting and I want to see him interact with other people and grow and change and whatever. Or he kills people off, and then, you know, his vague ending is now in danger because where he wanted to go, he's killed too many people off to get there. So now he has to figure out if, you know, is the ending going to change that he had in mind, or is he going to keep that ending and try to get the characters to go there, to nudge them along to get there, which is kind of like the antithesis of his entire writing style. So when you're reading it. A lot of times, it does mean you're noticing this either by something that the author says on their blog, if you follow their blog, or if you just see it in the writing style overall, if there's plot holes or contradictions. I mean, even plotters can have plot holes and contradictions, but pantsers, because they need so much more editing and stuff like that, it can be a lot more obvious, especially over a series, as the series moves along, whether or not there was an overall plan in place, or if they're just, I want to see where this is going, okay? and and the waters can be muddled because there are like 3 different types of series. And you're going, but Ginny, a series is a series. No, 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 no. So, you have series that are serialized. Okay, so the books have a large overarching plot, and there might be some subplots in there, and there's an arc in every single section of the book, but the books all deal with one major storyline. So that's, Harry Potter, The Lord of the Rings. Kim Harrison, I think, was more of a serial plot than an episodic plot. And, not the Caves of Steel, the Conqueror's trilogy was definitely serialized. Uh, so a lot of them come in trilogies, versus, okay, so and sometimes series will be serialized and the other things as well too. So then you have series that are more episodic. So an episodic series is kind of like what Jim Butcher is doing with Harry Dresden. He is creating a TV episode or a movie in each book. That's what I'm trying to do here with The Long Prospect, with Heaven Heathens, is that I'm creating these type of stories, or these types of files, as he calls them. I call them tales, that in each book, you don't necessarily have to have read the book before it. It's like a episodic TV show that, you can come in and meet the characters and enjoy the story without having to have been part of the very first book, from the very first book. So, it's not soap opera-ish, but it is soap opera-ish at the same time. You might have a better understanding of everything if you've read the books from the very beginning, but you don't necessarily have to. That's what you understand. Versus, whereas Thwarting Expectations is a series following a singular character, and it's going to be a trilogy with those 3 characters, and there's a whole wrapped up story in those 3 books of a serial. And then you have books that I see this a lot in the romance and also in mystery, where they're doing kind of like this shared universe. In mysteries, you can get a lot of episodic things, like, if you have somebody who's solving the mysteries, so like Amelia Peabody by Elizabeth Peterson. I got one of those in my things. Cozy Mysteries, the Bones books, the Rizzoli and Isles books. Those are all episodic books in what type of things. But then you have books that are just shared universes. And the first place I actually had this kind of was with Isaac Asimov. I bought some used books that were called Asimov's Universe, and he had created this universe, and he had kind of like licensed it out and said, here's a whole bunch of aliens, and here's a general political thing, write me some stories and we'll create anthologies in this universe with these different aliens by different people. And it was really, really cool. And that's kind of like, there's all these different characters, but they're sharing the same universe. So Star Wars can be a shared universe with serialized trilogies in it for different characters, but it's at different times. You're going up against different villains. So you have trilogies about Leia and, you know, her, or you have trilogies about the Solo twins, or you got trilogies about, you know, Luke and, you know, Mara Jade, and so, or you have whole series of books about X-Wing squadrons, but they're all in the same universe. You know, the Tales of the Mandalorians would be in the same universe as Star Wars. Star Trek was often very episodic, but it depending on what captain you're following. Is it Kirk or Picard, or are you following DS9, or are you following Star Trek Voyager? It's a shared universe. Well, and you see this a lot in romance books. So you'll see an author will start a story with one couple, and she'll just continue that kind of same universe, trying to tackle that story with different couples and different books, you know, but you don't always, so it's a shared universe, but you don't necessarily have to read the other books to enjoy the couple that you're reading right now, and they're just doing a smaller slice of the story overall type of thing. Very popular in paranormal romance. Valdemar is a shared universe. You have lots of little serialized trilogies with different in different points of history with different characters, and I mean she's even done the whole series of books in them. The shared universe that I think I read the most from Mercedes Lackey is her Elemental Master series. So that's, you know, you have lots of different Elemental Master magicians in the same period of time, but you're, you know, reading different stories about them in different places in England or the United States. They share the same rules, but it's not the same characters. So, and when you get into things like episodic stories or shared universe stories, then it gets a little bit more muddled on how much planning and plantsing and pantsing that these authors are actually doing, because, you know, when you're doing something like an episodic thing or a shared universe thing, it can be a lot easier to hide, you know, plot holes and, you know, if you're jumping around in history or whatever, you know, what's going on, and a lot of times it's standalone types of things, which when you're pantsing something, it's a lot easier to pants a standalone than it is to pants an overall series. So I, for the life of me, could not tell you if, you know, Brian Jakes, who wrote Redwall, if he's a pantser or a planner, because this is a shared universe, and every single different book is pretty much almost a different period of time. So the only thing I can tell you is that in Redwall, you know, we have some talking about animals that we actually never ever see again, like, you know, they talking about dogs and stuff like that, having a town of, you know, where Clooney the Scourge had come and taken over this town, and there's some dogs and they had to dig stuff out and things like that. But we never ever actually see dogs ever again in the story. It's really, really funny. But Redwall was one of the first ones he wrote, so, you know, later on he just might have forgotten it, or, you know, so it's like, it's a plot hole, but I can't tell you if he was overall planning the whole series of books and different adventures, or if he was just choosing a period of time in the history of Mossflower because he knows that these animals don't really keep good track of their history and just writing it in, you know, off the top of his head. I can't tell because it's in a shared universe episodic type of story. So now there is no, again, like I said last week when I was talking about the different valid ways of writing, there's no real valid way of writing a series. You know, if you want to pants a series, go ahead and pants the series. Please finish the entire thing, edit the entire thing, and then publish it, just for my sanity. But I know that's not possible with traditional publishing, but if you're indie publishing, it actually will help you with the algorithm if you do that. If you write a whole bunch of them at once and then post them every 3 months, and if you're pantsing a series, you want to do that, that's actually really good for you. But just so you can get sales. But if you're traditionally publishing, I know that's probably going to be harder because they do want the standalones and that they can turn into series, you know. But like I said, there's no real one true way of doing it. I just, as an author and as a reader who's analyzing things as I'm going along, I'm going, I can kind of tell that you weren't planning this series as you were writing, or oh, this series feels very, very planned. Like you have an idea of where you're going and how you're going to get there. And sometimes it's really, really hard to tell because of the type of series it actually is. Do they have a plan? Did they have like an overall story arching plan for the series and then they just slotted the different characters in, or are they just making this up off the top of their head because they know oral history in this universe doesn't matter anyways. And I mean, if you as a reader start reading and you start analyzing that, maybe you'll start seeing these things too, maybe not. It might, I don't know if it affects your enjoyment of a series if half a writer is planning it or if they're just doing it off the top of their head. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me one way or the other. It was something I noticed. Once I started writing series more myself, and it's kind of fun, honestly, sometimes. Oh, there was a plan. Was there a plan? Like, George Lucas actually did have kind of have a plan for the Star Wars stuff, and he was making sure that the writers were consulting with each other while they were writing to make sure, if you're writing at this time, that the stuff that you're writing about actually happened, and you're taking that into account as you're writing this book. The comics happened here, or this book series happened here, so now you have to take into account what they said. And sometimes it worked because, they were writing around the same times in the same order, and other times it doesn't work at all because, oh, you were writing in the, you don't know what's coming up ahead of you or behind you or whatever. So, it really varied with Star Wars whether or not it worked or not. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to talk about it because I think it's fun. Thanks for indulging me in listening to this today, and take care of yourselves, my lovelies. Stay safe, bless, and I'll see you in the next video.